Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa. Last week, President Biden and the Democratic National Committee announced plans to reorder the party's presidential nominating process. The new plan would make South Carolina, instead of Iowa, the first state in the 2024 primary calendar, followed by Nevada, New Hampshire, Georgia, and then Michigan. President Biden says part of the reason for the change is to give more non-white voters a say in the nomination process. And earlier today, we discussed this with Faiz Shakir, who managed the 2020 presidential campaign for Senator Bernie Sanders. Shakir is now a top advisor to the senator. Faiz, we really appreciate you taking the time to stop by. You have stirred a lot in Washington in recent days, writing a New York Times op-ed article for the New York Times where you argued that the push by top Democrats, including those in the Biden White House, to move the South Carolina primary to the front of the line would be a bad move for Democrats. And the criticism of your piece in some quarters has been that black voters in South Carolina deserve a chance to have that first shot in the nominating process. So what's your case against that?
Well, certainly I applaud President Biden on behalf of his plan, quite frankly, identifies the need to move up battleground states like Michigan and Georgia and Nevada closer to the front of the line. And that makes a ton of sense, Bob, because now we're talking about states that we need to invest in for a longer period of time, talk to a lot of voters, do a lot of voter outreach. And the outreach that would occur in a primary election would be beneficial to a general election effort to try to win that state, win the presidency. So that makes a ton of sense. And if we're following that logic, it's kind of one of those kids games where you do which of the following does not fit in the category, which one does not apply. And South Carolina doesn't apply. It's not a general election battleground, and it is a deeply conservative state, not consistent with a lot of democratic values, not a pro-union state.
Let's talk real politics here. That, as you said, the chairman of the party, Jamie Harrison, from South Carolina, one of the most influential members of Congress, Jim Clyburn, from South Carolina. President Biden, not from South Carolina, but certainly his presidential campaign was given an enormous lift by the South Carolina primary. Do you believe all of those players perhaps are leaning on the scale too much to make this happen?
Yeah, of course. And we start from the proposition that South Carolina was number 4 in the primary before, and now we're moving it to the front of the line. So if you're going to argue it for moving it to the front of the line, you have to have a pretty damn good reason for it. And I have not yet heard that reason. I've heard the really good reasons for moving Nevada up, for moving Michigan up, Georgia up, for considering North Carolina, any other numbers of states make a hell of a lot of sense. I haven't heard a very valid reason for South Carolina that is unique to South Carolina. I get the pushback, you've heard it, that, oh, well, we have to honor black voices. Sure, let's honor them and heed them. There's other ways to do it in a strategic way that makes our nominee stronger and makes the whole Democratic Party stronger. So, there are obviously a lot of, angst and anger perhaps from the Biden orbit that I understand. They did well in South Carolina and they want to honor South Carolina. That's great. That's not the reason to move it to the first in line.
If President Biden decides not to run, you personally would expect Vice President Harris to think hard about getting in, probably to run, Secretary Buttigieg to think hard about running, maybe getting in. What about your longtime confidant, the person you've advised for years, Senator Bernie Sanders? If President Biden does not run, will Senator Sanders give it a hard look and potentially get in?
I assume that he would give it a hard look. I don't know that I don't want to make a judgment for him. Obviously, it would be his choice to make. But I assume that he would want to reevaluate it. My operating assumption is that, Senator Sanders, like President Biden, done this a few times. He's very aware that, he's older now, and he'd have to make a real judgment about his own vigor and his stamina and his desire and hunger and passion to do this a third time. But if it were an open field, yeah, I'm confident he would take another look at it and say, do I want to do this or not? But I also think there'd be I think it'd be a situation, again, like 2020, Bob, where you'd have a lot of people in the field. So not just 3 or 4 or 5, but probably closer to 15, 20, probably.
And would you encourage him to think hard about it and to get in? Do you believe there is a path there for a Sanders 2024 race? Regardless of his final decision, do you see a path?
Well, I certainly see a path for someone who advocates strongly for working class people. You look at the trajectory of the Democratic Party losing core constituencies of the working class people. They, in my mind, are the persuasion vote. They are the ones that could move from a Republican column to a Democratic column, could make all the difference in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and other places. And the question is, who speaks to those working class people, diverse working class? We're talking white working class, black working class, Latino working class people. And certainly Senator Sanders carries immense strength with them. And I think, honestly, if we're getting in his head for a moment, my assumption would be he'd be asking, who else speaks to them? Who else could, as a Democratic nominee, do very well with those audiences? And I think, honestly, his first instinct was to say, I hope there are some other people. I'm not hungry to do this, but I will take a hard look at it if I feel that we're weak in our ability to speak to these working class individuals. And then, yeah, I think he would take a serious hard look at it. But I think he'd also want to see, are other people thinking the same way that he is, and defer first to see. I hope that there are other people who have a similar argument, desire, passion to speak particularly to working class individuals.
Are people coming to you saying, we're thinking about a Biden challenge?
No, I have not heard that personally. That's the thing. It's like I don't. If I did know any of those people, I would tell you. I have not heard anyone reach out to me and say, "Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to a challenge."
Is there any chance Senator Sanders challenges President Biden should Biden decide to run?
No, he stated that publicly. He would not challenge President Biden if he declared he wanted to run.
Faiz Shakir, longtime advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, his campaign manager in 2020. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.